Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a good week. Today we're doing a surreal mixed media collage using old calendars and watercolor. But before I jump into the project, let's talk a little bit about surrealism and collage. And just note, these aren't formal or complete explanations. These are very brief summaries as these terms relate to today's project. But if you're interested, I encourage you to explore the very rich histories of both concepts. So, in case you're wondering, surrealist art was born out of a larger surrealist movement that started in the early 1910s and lasted through the 1960s. And one of the major sources of inspiration for surrealism was the world of psychology. The subconscious is a major theme woven throughout surrealism. This gives surrealist art its characteristic dreamlike quality, and you'll often see surprising or bizarre juxtaposition of ideas that create symbols and metaphors, much like those weird dreams you have when you eat ice cream before bed. And I've included a list of some of the most well-known surrealist artists if you want to look up their work to get a visual. For today's project, we're going to get you started by creating a dreamlike atmosphere with watercolor and then laying collage compositions over the top. And collage, of course, involves cutting out images, words, shapes, etc., and gluing them together to create a new composition. Do you see how this lends itself perfectly to creating a surrealist piece with juxtaposed ideas? So that's the concept. Now let's talk about the materials. For starters, you want old calendars. Since it's the beginning of the year when I'm recording this, I thought you might have an old calendar lying around. But if you don't, you can also use old magazines, books, newspapers, really anything you don't mind cutting up. I actually buy calendars based on how I can repurpose them later. I'm showcasing the different artists here in case you like any of the images I use in the collage today. And of course, you'll want a pair of scissors as well as watercolor paper. I'm using cold press 140 pound by Strathmore, and it's 11 by 15 inch, but you can use whatever size you like. You'll also want a pencil and eraser for some minimal drawing, a watercolor palette with a few shades of blue and green. This Viviva watercolor set is a great one. I'll also be using a quill brush and a mop brush. We're going to be doing large strokes with these, so use a size appropriate to your paper size. And you'll also want a glue stick. Extra strength is a wise choice. A blue watercolor marker. I'm using the Artify brand, which has been pretty good. Just using blue watercolor should be fine too. And don't forget water and paper towels. I also have a full materials list in the description. Now let's get started. So for this piece, we are going to paint a dreamlike ocean background with 3 bottles floating in the water and fill those bottles with our collage compositions. Go ahead and put things in the bottle that would be bizarre, surprising, or create a new reality. For example, instead of cutting out a picture of a rolled up message to put in the bottle, maybe you're drawn to the image of a bathtub and an elephant, and you put the elephant in the bathtub in the bottle. Bizarre. As you can see, I've already cut out my collage pieces. These aren't the only ones that I cut out. I extracted dozens of images from my calendars so I could use whatever caught my eye. Personally, I think that's a great place to start, and it really helps with interesting dreamlike imagery if you can use free association to put things together. I had a bunch of ladies, butterflies, and flowers, so I'm going to make butterfly women, each doing something different, and I think their bottles floating on the ocean will be like their sanctuaries. Now, since collage is made up of many small parts, to make things look cohesive, you could consider connecting your pieces through color, texture, or image to create a common thread. For example, I chose to work primarily with reds and pinks and am making butterfly women who still look very distinct from one another. So you're going to want to assemble 3 different compositions and make sure you reserve enough space to draw a bottle around them later. Once you have your creations assembled, glue them together individually, but don't glue them to the page. Also, my camera mysteriously stopped recording, so the middle butterfly woman is now magically glued together. And though it can be tedious to glue together, I think layering multiple pieces to make an individual piece creates depth and really makes a collage come to life, so it's totally worth it. And I think I'm going to leave the flower cluster separate from the butterfly lady because I might need to play with some spacing later on. It's just nice to have your larger components assembled, then you won't have your pieces blow away on you. Another aspect of collage to consider is the general flow of the pieces. Think about how you want to lead your viewer's eye through the composition. What story are you trying to tell? Or in the case of surrealist collage, what dream world and reflections are you taking the viewer through? Remember, you're the tour guide. To help you get a feel for that flow, we'll utilize the idea of a watery, wavy background. Starting from the left, I'm going to place the flamingo butterfly lady closer to the top corner of the paper as though at the top of a wave. and then the sleeping butterfly lady dipping closer to the bottom, like the trough of the wave, and then the fancy butterfly lady rising back up. As the viewer's eyes follow the rise and fall of the images, you'll be taking them into that wavy, dreamlike world you've created. Once the images are positioned, we're going to draw bottles around them. I think the most basic way to do this would be to think about drawing a set of parentheses around each image, leaving room for a neck, which you can make by drawing two parallel lines and connecting them to the shoulders of the bottle. If you have room to show the top of the bottle, draw a sideways oval to connect the parallel lines at the top. For the bottom, draw a curved C shape to connect the sides of the bottle. And I apologize that you can't see my pencil markings very well. Hopefully that description was helpful. We will outline them again in color later, so you can have a visual in a little bit. And while I am aiming for as much symmetry as possible, it's okay if things don't look perfect. It just kind of adds to the surreal, dreamlike quality of your piece. And feel free to make adjustments to your sketches until you're satisfied with the symmetry and the positioning. I know I took my time on this part, but once you're done, go ahead and set your collage images aside, and we'll move on to creating a waveline. Also, you'll notice that I've angled my images because bottles bobbing in the ocean wouldn't be perfectly straight, they would tilt with the water. And that's important because we're going to draw in our wave line starting on the left side of the paper and swoop it across our first bottle to match the angle of the bottle. Then we'll do that with the second and third bottles. So you kind of end up drawing a U that spans the width of each bottle, and that will be our wave line. I like to do a last minute check to make sure everything fits the way I want it to. Okay, this looks good. So now let's get into some watercolor. For the watercolor background, we're going to paint our ocean waves and then a cloudy sky background. So let's start with the ocean wave. For the ocean wave, I'm going to grab my mop brush and lay down a thin layer of water from the wave line down to the bottom of the paper. Once that's done, I'm going to take my quill brush, load it with water and medium blue, and apply a large strip of blue at the bottom of my paper. Then, starting on the left side and working my way to the right, I'm going to pull the color upward in swooping strokes to meet the waveline. The effect should be swooping diagonal lines that take on the texture of a curling wave. While the waves dry, we can work on our sky. For this, I'm going to load my mop brush with water and apply patches of water all over the area above the waveline. Then I'll load my quill brush with water and light blue and tap the color into the watery patches. Then I'll blend it outward to create blue sky while also leaving patches of white to create scattered clouds. And as you're creating your clouds, feel free to tap in more blue to intensify the color in certain areas as desired. Okay, the sky is looking good, but to create a little more contrast between the sky and the water, I'm going to add another layer of blue to the waves, this time a deeper blue. And we'll apply it the same way we applied the first layer, by adding a strip of color to the bottom and swooping the color up to meet the waveline in diagonal strokes. We'll let this layer dry a little bit, but while it's still damp, I'm also going to add a few streaks of a warm medium green and blend them in using the same swooping strokes as before. We'll let this dry and then grab our watercolor marker to outline the bottles. And as I said in the beginning, you could also use watercolor for this bit if you don't have a watercolor marker. If you're using a watercolor marker, I recommend using the brush nib when you trace over the bottle outline. I prefer to use a watercolor marker for this bit because it's easier to control the pigment and the color holds the outline a bit better when we blend out the color, which we'll talk about in a moment. And for now, I'm just outlining the top of the bottle above the waveline. We'll get to the bottom eventually. With the outline complete, I'm going to load the tip of my quill brush with water and trace it along the inside of my outline to lightly blend out the color. This will create a subtle shadow and a sense of dimension. If you're using regular watercolor, I would do the same thing, but let the outline dry slightly so you have more control over how much you blend out the color and you don't lose the outline. We'll follow the same steps for the other two bottles. Okay, the tops of the bottles are dry, so now we can glue down our collage pieces, which is pretty straightforward. Just ensure the entire backside is evenly coated and that the piece is positioned where you want it before you press down. And while I'm gluing here, I want to point out that this project could easily be broken down and worked on over the course of a work week. I know what it's like to not always have a lot of time to devote to creativity, so I think it's important to remember that you don't have to do it all in one sitting, and it can actually be a more rewarding experience that way because you're taking time and not rushing. For example, day one of this project could be cutting out the collage pieces. Day two, assemble the collage pieces. Day 3, draw the bottles in waves. Day 4, do the watercolor background. Day 5, finish the bottles and affix the collage pieces. Creativity is such a healthy outlet for stress, so don't let time be a barrier any more than it has to be. And breaking things down into small steps can make something relaxing and rejuvenating because you only have one thing to focus on. Cutting bits of paper out of a calendar is all you need to think about for a little while, which is nice. I just wanted to share that with whoever needs to hear it. And with that, our gluing is done, so let's finish these bottles. I'm going to grab my watercolor marker again and outline the bottom half of the bottle below the waveline. Then I'm going to color over any part of the collage that's below the waveline. Next, I'll take my mop brush and make even strokes across the bottle to blend the color evenly in the bottom of the bottle. This makes it look like the bottle is submerged in water. We'll repeat this for the other two bottles. While I'm finishing up this surreal collage, I just want to say thank you so much for following along today, especially if you've made it to the end. I hope this project has been a helpful prompt to getting you started on your own collage. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so go ahead and leave a comment. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button. All right, I think our surrealist collage is complete. And I have to say, I really found this to be super relaxing, so I hope you'll try it too. As always, thank you so much for creating with me today. Until next time, take care.